my background comes from my son and I. We started a film and media production company in 2000, and since then, my son and I, he's actually the one who pulled me into getting into film. He's actually a gifted film director and slash producer. And for the past 5 years, we've just been putting out award-winning film documentaries. We've done a web series. And this is something that, I gained more interest in doing. I come from more of a musical background. I played the saxophone, but my son, just following my son, I took interest in it. On this most recent film project that we actually collaborated on was called Greenwood, the Amalgamated People. I've always had a big desire for history. And I just wanted to incorporate, history into the people that I've been working with, as far as my director of photography, my cinematographers. I knew the people that can get the project done. I just pretty much had to sit down and figure out how I wanted to kind of make a smart film. I didn't want to have an angry film, but I wanted it to be smart. So I didn't focus on the what happened. I focused on why it happened, why they were able to keep their dollars in the community for up to 21 days, why the community was so upset with them because they were so successful. So as long as I focus on the why and not the what, because I realized through most of the documentaries that I watched prior to that, I noticed that you left the film angry. So my film had to be a little bit different, and I wanted it to show how important it is for us to get back to owning and controlling our dollars. And at the end of the film, you actually feel inspired to actually start a business when you finish watching my film. If you don't understand from whence you cometh, other people will define who you are. So that's very important for you to understand and do your research and know from whence you cometh. That is very important, because if you don't know from whence you cometh, people will always identify and put you in a category where you may not want to be, because you don't know who you are. So if you don't know your background and someone says to you, okay, this is who you are, if you never done the research on yourself, you will always believe that that's who you are. My first film that I did was about my son who lives with sickle cell anemia. And if you know anything about sickle cell anemia, it's a disease that not only affects African Americans, but it affects people globally. People don't know there's over 4 million Indians in India. There are French Corsicans that suffer from the disease. People from Greece, Italy suffer from the disease. So we wanted to dispel the myth that this was only an African American disease. And being as though that my son, he lives with the disease, he was the first one to actually direct and edit a film as told by him. I was the producer on the project, so that kind of really helped me really identify and show that some of these things and these narratives that are actually out there, we're in a position to actually change the narrative because we had a film and media production company. Just like the tie into the film that I did about the District Greenwood, I was in a position to have a film production company to control the narrative, and that's very important. If you don't control the narrative, it's hard for you to control your identity as well. 2020 kind of forced us to dig deep. Not only as a people, but us as a film production company, to show how strong we are as a people. And if you didn't learn anything else from this whole pandemic situation, it forced many people who were in marginal situations and working marginal jobs, they realized how important they really were. Because at the end of the day, they saw how much they were valued, because many of them were laid off. However, what it did, it encouraged many of us to start our own businesses, and which is very important. True wealth is something that you own, you can control, and you can leave for those after you. So put us in a position so we can start creating some type of generational wealth, because those marginal positions that many of us were actually working in were creating a capital for those small companies and creating generational wealth for other people. However, but it taught us we had to dig deep, and people came up with a plan. I saw a little girl that had an interest in, baking cookies, and her parents encouraged her to put a price tag on it, because that's the beginning of entrepreneurship, and that's the beginning of starting and owning and controlling your dollars. So 2020 forced a lot of us, if you were smart about it, you look around, you say, look, it's time for us to really start buckling down, start looking out for ourselves, especially I'm speaking in terms of those people of color. To look out for ourselves and start creating some type of generational wealth, and start to learn how to build on one another and lean on one another, understand the concept of group economics, as far as leaning on one another, especially in those particular groups, people that look like you. And I think 2020, as far as on the positive side, those people that I hang around, it forced them to put themselves in a position to become entrepreneurs and or put themselves in a position to start creating generational wealth for themselves. Black history is global history to me, because there's no place on this planet where we have not touched. If you think about the history, we think about the history that they're trying to remove from the school books, that slavery never existed. However, we were here long before slavery existed. If you know about the Folsom people in Folsom, Arizona, they were here thousands of years before slaves even came here. So we've been here for a very long time. We've conquered or been places all over the world. So when I think of Black history, I think of world history, because we have impacted so many places around the world as far as technology, medicine. You know, we've been here for a very, very long time. So when I think of Black History Month, it should be Black History Year, because we've impacted countries and places all around the world, and still impacting it to this day. Some of the things that we still use today were invented by African Americans. I think that it is very important to, you know, as a filmmaker, to put out stories that are thought-provoking and you leave people thinking, and also leave people where if there's something that they don't know, once they leave your production, they'll go and do the research on their own to find out. You know, I always say facts tell and stories sell. So if you have the ability to tell a good story, the facts are going to be in the story if you tell a good story. So.